We are going to be talking to Mr. Norman Wright. Norman was the lead on the standard Come Go With Me and several other recordings by the Del Vikings that you might know. And at the same time, we are going to be talking to Mr. Kripp Johnson. Kripp was the lead on the big Del Vikings hit Whispering Bells. And both leads were in the group at the same time. This is not one lead replacing another. Because, if you do recall at the time, and if you don't, understand this, the Del Vikings' first record, Come Go With Me, was one of the biggest records of the year 1957. They followed it up with another major record for that year, Whispering Bells. One was done by Norman and one was done by Kripp. This is highly unusual, and this is a highly respected group for good reason. And now to our interview on the real history of rock and roll with all four of today's Del Vikings. That's John Byas, Ritzy Lee, who has been with the Del Vikings since 1958, and two of the founding members of the group, two of the famous lead singers of the Del Vikings on their big hits, Mr. Norman Wright and Mr. Kripp Johnson. Listen now to part one of our interview with the legendary Del Vikings.
The members of the Del Vikings consisted of Norman Wright, Dave Ritzy, Don Jackson, Kripp Johnson, and Clarence Quick. Those were the original members. The group was originated in '56. We signed our first contract with Phoebe label, November of '56, at which time we recorded Whispering Bells and Come Go With Me and quite a few more things on the Phoebe label. Later, Joe Averback, who owned the Phoebe label, he sold the master to Dot, and that's when Dot took over and went nationally.
Was Gus Backus not a member on those recordings?
Gus was not on the original recordings, Come Go With Me, Whispering Bells, and those recordings. I think he came on later when the group went over to Mercury. Some of the fellows went with Mercury. Don Jackson and I, we stayed with Dot at that time.
Was it a conscious decision to have Gus Backus in the group because you are known forever as the first integrated group?
Didn't Gus take Jackson's place?
He took Don Jackson's spot after he had got discharged from the service, and it was a spot there. He just filled it in, and it wasn't nothing that was premeditated to want to have an interracial group. It was just fellows there was singers, and that was it.
The group was already integrated when
Yeah.
we had Dave Ritzy. He was one of the white fellas before Gus came. But no, there wasn't no politics involved in anything. He just filled a man's spot. He fills Don Jackson's spot when Don Jackson left.
Did you realize, though, that when you got the exposure and the album covers and things from Mercury, that you would become known as the first integrated group? I mean, did you know there would be a lot of talk about that?
It was mentioned after the first recording, How Can I Find True Love and Come Go With Me. It was brought out that this was part of we'll say our history, so to speak. You know, and it went down that way.
Mm-hmm. Were either of you fellas in any other groups prior to the Del Vikings?
No, nothing professional. I've sang with other groups in high school, and I've sang in quartets and church quartets with my brothers and my cousins. But for as professionally singing, recording, no, this was the first time when we recorded for Phoebe.
It was the first time that either you or Norman actually recorded?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
The records on the Phoebe Come Go With Me, that was the same master that Dot took?
Yes.
Okay. You never recorded before. You go to a studio to record a song that Clarence wrote, Come Go With Me. I mean, that was the first hit, but was that the first recording?
Both.
First hit and
Same
first recording.
Right.
Same session.
Who was the band?
We had a band. The guys were in the Air Force with us.
Really?
There was a guy named Joe Lopes. He played lead guitar.
Yeah.
Now, he was from Brooklyn with Clarence, wasn't he?
No, he was from
Holyoke,
Holyoke,
Massachusetts.
Mass, outside of New Bedford, Massachusetts.
Okay, see, the rumor always had it that...
No.
Okay.
Peoples
Yeah, a guy named Peoples. He was.
and Upshaw, he plays saxophone. And trying to think who the
Sergeant
bass.
Peoples was on drums. Yeah.
Trying to think who the bass player was.
But like we said, most of the guys that were on the session was in the Air Force with us, the musicians.
That first one.
And those were the records that actually were the hits then.
Come go with me and
How-
Whiskey Bells.
How... it's hard for me to imagine this. Here is all these people recording in New York City, okay? Frankie Lyman, you have the Big Al Sears and Panama Francis. I mean, you have all of these legendary session people and all these R&B rock and roll producers from New York who've been doing this stuff, in some cases, with George Goldner type thing, if you're going out since late 53 or 54. How do you guys come along for the first time with of all things, guys that are in the Air Force playing the instruments, and knock out a session like Come Go With Me, which sounds like the best people in New York City are just jamming? I mean, that's an incredible record to have done that. Did you realize when you heard it played back that this was like almost a superhuman record? I mean, that record, that just grabbed everybody by the throat when they heard it. I mean, that was
No, I really didn't realize it was going to be as big as it was, but one of the disc jockeys in Pittsburgh that we were doing record hops for at that time, what was his name? Barry K.
Right.
I think he was over at KVKA or KQV at that time, and we were, like I said, we did a lot of record hops for him, and he really promoted the record. He really pushed it. In fact, the record sold in the tri-state area. You're talking about Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Virginia, West Virginia. That's where the records really sold at first. Because Joe Everback, he had a distributorship, and he had that area. But when Doc took over, Doc went nationally and put it out all across the
So
country.
you had a true local hit on Phoebe
Yes,
prior to it.
prior to it going to Doc.
Yes.
Yes.
Norman, what did you think when you heard it played back and you heard yourself opening up with this dum dum dum? I mean, did you realize that people? I mean, did you realize it was something extra special, or was it just?
I don't know if it's extra special, but it was something that I feel we all have a dream about. You want to hear yourself recorded, and after listening to it for a week or two, I think we all kind of realized we had something on our hands that was a little, I say, bigger than we had anticipated at the time. Now, we knew that recording would be something in itself a gem, but hearing it every day on the radio and hearing the potential of it, and I think that's when we all kind of realized that I think we got something here. You know, then other people started calling and writing, hey, I hear your record. Well, yes, other than the state, in another state, Ohio, West Virginia, and people that you've been known for years that haven't seen in years, but you come and get in contact with you. You know, then it starts to take off. You realize you got something.
Now I was talking to you the other night. I can't put it into words, but I remember the impact of that record on myself and people who were, my age. I mean, that record just knocked people out. They heard it the first time, they just went crazy.
I think it was the simplicity of the song. Come Go With Me is a very simple song, and type of song that anyone could sing along with it. Kids get on the corner, listen to the record, and it's one of those kind of songs that you can sing a cappella. You don't need any music behind it, really. It's a good a cappella song, and it was very simple, and I think that's why it really sold.
But there's other elements in that record. I don't believe that there had ever been a record in the top 10 rock or pop chart, at that point, that had such a loose feeling, where all of a sudden everybody is jamming in the break. I don't think that had ever been in the top 10 prior to you guys doing that.
Is that right?
That, I'd say that's accurate.
Okay.
I don't think anybody else was yelling and kind of sounding like you're trying to get the sax player to go harder or whatever it was. That's how it sounded to me, you know. And the scream or the falsetto, whatever, over Clarence's bass part. The whole thing had this tight and yet, so anything could happen. It didn't sound like it was scripted exactly. It sounded like you were just having a great time and you managed somehow to do it in a short period of time. So it was a record.
We were in the service club, and that's how we got together and started harmonizing together in the service club while we were at Greater Pittsburgh Air Force Base. And Clarence came up with this song. He wrote the song, and we got around the piano, and we started harmonizing. He was singing lead at that time, you know, to give us an idea how the song goes. And that's how it all came about, in the service club in the Air Force.
Where was it recorded?
In Pittsburgh.
Was it the Sheridan Hotel? What record company was down there?
I know it was in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, Pittsburgh, downtown
But
Pittsburgh.
it was a regular recording studio.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything odd about that.
No.
It was fun for us in a sense. You know, we're getting a chance to do something that we always wanted to do, and I don't think we got uptight until about maybe 4 or 5 records down the line when it became regiment. Charts came in. The feel wasn't there to the point of like the first couple of sessions that we had our own guys with us, you know. Now, dealing with Dot, we're getting professionals, you know. Charts is made up. We're getting to sound like something, a little more closer coaching, you know. Things that we were taking for granted then, it was kind of like eliminated, you know. So you can use that later on, but for this, you got to keep it a little on the straight, you know. It became a profession after a while, you know, but it still maintained its humor, you know. It was a lot of fun doing the work.
So if Come Go With Me, if you carry that out, we'll never know this at first, but had the first hit not been Come Go With Me, and had Come Go With Me been 2 years later, it very well might not have had a lot of that clapping and yelling. And somebody might have said, well, that's not in the lead sheet.
I think Joe Averback was very instrumental in that, as far as the way it came across, his idea of the song. Although Quick wrote the song, but when we got into the session, Joe Averback had a good ear. There were some certain things that he wanted to hear himself, and I think that we owe most of that to Joe.
Well, it's a revolutionary record for the time that it was done, you know, and it's a wonderful record no matter when you did it. But you broke a lot of rules there. I mean, unwritten rules.
Okay.
But I think rules that had you been with Dot at the time, they probably would have drawn the line on it. As you said, hey, you know.
Maybe, yeah. If you look at it like that, I think so. Yeah, that session was loose. I mean, real loose, you know. And I don't know if any of the other musicians had any experience of being in the studio. I know I myself, as a young kid of 19, never even seen inside of one of them until the first day, and it was like heaven to me. I was enjoying myself.
Was it hard? Had you sung very much with people playing instruments?
Yes, no. But most of it you're singing back in the 50s. It was basically a cappella.
Right. I don't believe that anyone can cite me an example of anyone that ever did this kind of thing before or since. And that is, you had a hit record, Norman was singing lead on the record.
Yes.
Whoever had a record in the top 10, what group can you think of that ever had a record in the top 10 that had the follow-up not sung by the same singer?
I really never given it a thought.
I think you broke a lot of rules there, too. I can't imagine. Can you imagine the follow-up to Only You by Tony Williams and the Platters being the great pretender sung by Zola Taylor?
Yeah.
I mean, not that she's the equal of Tony, and not that you guys aren't counting. But I mean, who would do that?
That was Quick's baby. I got to give him credit because his thing was everybody sings lead. There was no one leader in the group. We all had to participate in the background and doing some of the leading. If you listen to some of the albums, you'd notice that there's more than one lead singer in the group, and that was his little pet thing. He excelled at that. He was pretty good with that one.
Also, there are certain songs that, say you got a group of consists of 5 men or 4 men. There may be a certain song that one of the other members that didn't lead the song or the hit song, or maybe the follow-up to the hit song, maybe he's re-sang the song because of the fact that the song fitted him better.
Sure.
So that's what's the reason for most of that.
Although, if we were to talk about any other classic group other than the Dell Vikings, you would find that other person on the flip side, or you'd find them on an album. You would never find them on the A side. Never following up the top 10. And yet you guys went in the top 10 twice with different leads.
Yes.
When I first heard Whispering Bells, again, like with Come Go With Me, I knew I was hearing a record that was just terrific. I just loved it from the, just immediately. But I didn't know it was the Dell Vikings till it was either Alan Freed or Jocko who I first heard play, or maybe it was Dr. Jocko. I didn't know it was the Dell Vikings because I wasn't hearing Norman.
Okay.
And there wasn't that unstructured thing that I liked about Come Go With Me. That wasn't there. Everything was tighter. I don't mean that negative, it's
Sure,
tighter.
sure.
That record didn't seem to drift off here and there. It was right on to what it was doing. It didn't take into that hand clapping kind of thing. And then he said, Dell Vikings, what?
Yeah, that was Phoebe's second effort. We did that one in Ohio, and it was a little more organized than the first one was. It was structured a little better. They were really prepared for it this time. The first one, it was just walk in, just get the job done. Wow, look what we got.
Right.
The second time around, this is what we can do when we go there. Now we know what we got. And it made a great deal of difference.
Why Ohio in a different studio?
Was that Ohio or Chicago?
No, Ohio.
Ohio,
The
okay.
second was Ohio. I think it was Steubenville.
Okay.
Did you feel that maybe you were
Well, that's where Averback wanted to have it recorded. It was his decision to make. It wasn't nothing. No one thought about it or anything.
See, I would have felt like I was walking under a ladder or something. Hey, don't go to another studio. This is where we did Come Go With Me.
The other studio was very small. Very small. It was too small for what was coming. If it were to go for nostalgia's sake, it has its thing, but because each studio after that became bigger and larger and a little more equipped. Much more.
Were the people playing the instruments on Whispering Bells not the Air Force group?
Yeah, we had 2 of them, didn't we? I think we had Upshaw and Joe Lopes on that one. We took them with that. That's where
He played
the guitar and the sax man.
Oh, that's what really carried it.
Upshaw. He's Gene Upshaw. He's from Philadelphia.
And a lot more echo on at least it sounds like there's more echo on your lead than on yours.
Well, they were different technicians. And like I say, the studio was much larger, a little more up-to-date what was going on, They had charts written up, had studio musicians on that set, except for the saxophone player and the guitar player.
From the technical aspect of it, I must say that Joe Averback was up on most of that.
Yeah.
That was most of his decision.
But that was his
Because he was spending the money.
Right,
it was his record company, it was his distributorship, and so he had the ideas of which way he wanted to go.
Again, with Whispering Bells, you kind of break some rules because there's no bridge in Whispering Bells. You come back with a verse, you go away, you come back again, you go away, you come back, and people didn't make records like that.
That's the way Kripp wrote the song. That's the way the song was
And you
written.
said like he wrote simplistic. He also wrote, I think he heard sounds or something.
I think so also, yes.
Because I get
He was a great
a
writer.
much stronger feeling overall than I do from the individual words. Like this, you hear the bells ring. And in Come Go With Me, they come with me way beyond the sea. Does that have anything to do with the fact that you were in the Air Force and might in fact go beyond the sea?
Cousin Jay Will was on his mind when he put that together.
I have no idea.
See, kids take a lot of these things literally, and I took things literally when I bought the records. And most of the records said it clearly what they were, and I never knew what that meant, way beyond the sea. And I thought, well, maybe it meant something that didn't. Or maybe just rhymed. But I took it literally, meaning beyond the sea, but I couldn't figure out where he was going. Okay.
It could have been trying to rhyme the words together.
Well, yeah.
Me and sea, you
Right.
know.
Oh, sure. But when you really love a record, and I mean, I love these records, and the people that bought it, I'm sure they loved it and still love them. You take everything seriously. How did they do that? Why did they do this? And what did the words seriously do? I figured maybe it did have a meaning.
Right about here, we're going to see some live footage of the Dell Vikings in action at the end of the 1980s. Now, our camera for the most part was handheld. That means it wasn't on a tripod. We didn't bring lights with us. That means you won't get brilliant colors. And if we had to go up to the side or behind the band a little, the sound might be a little strange. But understand, the colors, the lighting, the steadiness of the camera, and some of the sound, you have to blame on us. We'll take all that into account. It sounds pretty darn good. I'm just giving you this as a disclaimer so you'll understand what it is you're going to see. There's no excuses here. Watch the Dell Vikings. Okay, that's been part one of our interview on the real history of rock and roll with the Dell Vikings. On the next Real History of Rock and Roll, part two of our interview with the Dell Vikings. That's the real history of rock and roll, emphasis on the four letters R-E-A-L, real, because it really is the real history of rock and roll. Real and true, rock and roll all the way. Thank you. Dell Vikings.
Dum 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 dee doo dum 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 dee doo dum 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 dee doo dum wow 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 dum 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 dee doo dum
Okay, that's the Del Vikings. That's what the records sound like. Here's part 2 of our interview with the Del Vikings.
You're in the top 10. Come go with me. You're in the top 10 with Whispering Bells. People buying the records, to them, the Del Vikings are undone. Big label, or because of Pat Boone, you think it's a big label anyway.
It was a big label.
Yeah, well, okay, it was a big independent.
Sure.
All of a sudden, with Whispering Bells still on the way up, out comes, I'm sure it's Cool Shit.
Cool Shit, right?
I just want to get my dates correct.
Sure.
Whispering Bells enters the national charts for the first time at the very end of June 1957. Almost the end of July, in other words, we're talking about 1 month later, Cool Shake first enters the charts.
Yes, that's
Now,
what.
that's where everybody gets lost.
That was a split up of the group. That was a split. Like I said, Norman and Quick and Dave Ritzy and Gus Backus was in the group at that time. They went over to Mercury.
Okay.
Don Jackson and I stayed with Phoebe and Dot until later. I went over with Mercury with the rest of the fellas. But
and that was Mercury's effort. See, Dot had Whispering Bells on the charts, and Mercury came out with Cool Shake. That's why it fell on top of Cool Whispering Bells in the manner that it did.
Right.
If Dot had it, it wouldn't have came out in that fashion.
No, it wouldn't.
No, it'd have been later down the line.
Sure.
But Mercury just put this right out on top of it.
Right.
But that's what happened with that one.
And that's where you had suddenly this crazy attempt of distinguishing the two groups, where one had one L and one had two L's.
that was Driver backside there.
Yeah.
Well, I maybe I should use the word crazy, but to the public, if the disc jockey said that's the Del Vikings, you can't tell he's saying two L's.
Right.
So it was like the Del Vikings were all over the place.
Yeah.
May I ask why there was a split?
Well, Don Jackson and I, when we signed the contract, we were of age, and that's why we were obligated. But the other fellows, they could get out of the contract because of the fact they were underage at the time they signed it. So they went over to Mercury, got a deal with Mercury, went with Mercury. We were buying. Don Jackson and I were buying to the contract with Dot and Phoebe.
You would have left Phoebe and Don?
More than likely, I would have went over to Mercury with the rest of the guys, yeah.
Well, I guess it goes without saying that Aberback didn't want the fellas to leave.
No, of course not. Of course not. But I think Mercury gave them an offer that they couldn't refuse.
And you were going to a label that had the Platters, and so they
Sure,
put the label in
sure.
the group.
Sure.
Or they seemed to, anyway.
And we were somewhat restricted. Kripp and Don Jackson and were already out of the service, so they weren't hampered to the point of where they could travel, when they can go there, and how long they can stay. You know, like if we didn't have leave time, we wasn't going anywhere. So that was a restriction, and that kind of made that situation like it was. They were able to do a little more than we were. You know, if we got 1-2 gigs a year, it was good. You know. But it was basically a lot of records sold. You know, Mercury would cut them 6 months later. They out. Every 6 months they popping out. Bing, 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 bing. You know, it wasn't so much that we did a lot of personal appearances. That contingent of the group.
Did you have someone in your group who sang Whispering Bells, and did you have someone in your group who sang Come Go?
Yeah, I sang Come Go With Me and Whispering Bells in the other group. In fact, when the guys went over to Mercury, the other members that came in the group went on the road with me was a guy named Eddie Everett, Art Bud, and Chuck Jackson. Chuck Jackson sang with us for about a year before he went out, did a single on Wine. He sang, had a hit called I Don't Want to Cry, Woke Up Crying. Yeah.
He did with you, Willette.
Right, Willette, sure. Yeah.
Did you fellas feel that this was an impossible situation, that sooner or later you'd tear yourselves apart, or the two groups would just bang their heads together?
No, I didn't look at it that way because of the fact that it really wasn't our fault that it happened that way.
Oh, no, I don't mean it was your fault, but
Yeah.
what is a disc jockey going to do if he's handed a record on Phoebe and a record on Mercury, how is he?
I don't think they had any. That problem was more legal than any damn thing else. If you want to really, because we didn't have too big a problem with it, you know, the groups themselves and the disc jockeys. I know they did. You know, they really could care less how many L's you got in your name. You know, but I don't think that if it presented a problem, it was in a legal format more than anything else.
I think there were probably some radio stations though that would have had problems playing two new records by the same group. They probably would have preferred to only program one.
I'm sure that they would rather for it to have been that way.
And Mercury, of course, would have the clout.
Yes.
So all the Mercury recordings are your group.
I was over there also.
Yeah.
Before they left Mercury?
Yeah.
See, that's why it's always.
I was on flat tire.
Okay.
Right. Flat tire.
How could you? When I come home.
When I come home.
Yeah, we did a lot of things over there.
I'm spinning.
Yeah. Well, spinning was on TV also.
Yeah. It did 58, 59. I think it was 59 was the last in the studio recording we did in New York City, and he was on those sessions.
Now, does that mean that the Phoebe group then was no longer, and you were with Norman again, and there was no more Phoebe group?
Not at that time, no. When I went over to Mercury, it was.
So now there was one Del Vikings.
It was one Del Vikings group then at that time, yes.
Who was Chuck Sager?
Chuck Sager was a ranger, and rather
Mercury.
For Mercury.
Oh,
A&R. He's A&R for Mercury.
Yeah.
When Come Along With Me came out, what I didn't like about it, although it's a nice record, I didn't like the fact that it followed Come Go With Me. I thought that for the Del Vikings, that wasn't necessary. That this was too good a group to follow. And yet, when I heard you sing it live, of course, it's great. Was there resistance to doing a song that kind of echoed the first hit?
It was Mercury's doing. They wanted to cover something or record something that sounds like "Come Go With Me," see, which they missed out on as far as you know. They didn't have the control of that, so they come up with "Come Along With Me." I think they went out with the same understanding when he dropped "Cool Shake" on "Whispering Bells."
Were there anyone at DOT trying to get you to go there at that point when you were Mercury? Because nobody knew better than DOT how the Del Vikings could sell.
Well, we really didn't sign an individual contract with DOT. The members did. Our contract was with Phoebe. Phoebe had a contract with DOT. Okay.
Well, I understand, but did DOT come after you though when they realized that part of the group was able to go to Mercury?
I think DOT was basically a nationwide distributor, and they set up the studio time, if I can remember this correctly. And like he said before, the contract was with Phoebe and subcontract out to DOT. But Mercury came along and picked up the contract. So they got distribution and the rights per se, you know, royalty rights or whatever it is.
Real fast legally, and there you were in Mercury.
Well, being down as Mercury, with Phoebe's in the background now. Before Phoebe's in the foreground with DOT, you know,
Right.
DOT was doing the distributing since Phoebe wasn't large enough to press that many records, you know, and shoot them out nationwide as fast as DOT could. They had more distributorships. But Mercury became, let's say, the number one. And as far as that, then Phoebe was behind it. You know. That's where that turn came in. That's why so many records were made on Mercury. We were in the studio every other month for some reason, rather than cutting a lot of pieces. You know.
Did you feel that Mercury put in maybe too much instrumentation, or maybe were a little too pop with some of the instrumentation? Is there any?
It was. We had a unique sound, and we had Chuck Sager. He was the A&R man. He had some fresh new ideas, and it was a good marriage on as far as that concerned, because it worked. So if something's working, you stay with it.
Right.
We used strings for the. I think we had reputation of being the first rock group to use strings, but other groups before us had what they would call rhythm and blues. But had a nice combination of musicians.
Right. Well, you say if something works, you don't change it, and that's true. But we could also say that the raucous sound of "Come Go With Me" worked. Why didn't Mercury want to get that?
That's like, there's no two things alike.
Okay.
And that's it. You know, there's two bricks sitting there on the ground, and you get up on them. There is two bricks, but they're not two of the same.
Okay.
They're different. So
Right.
you would be redundant if you would strive to go and keep doing the same thing over and over again. In that sense, yes, then that's broke. Don't then fix it.
Okay.
But if you got something unique, see, that's what was unique about the group. You said that the next song came out was a different guy leading it. Well, it's the same group.
Right.
It's the same group. So that's what made that so. 5 singers, 5 different leads.
Okay.
And you would get something different each time.
Right. And you did. It seems to me that you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe that you were the first people to think of speeding up semi-tone level. Is that correct?
I think we were.
Because a lot of groups did record it soon after and followed your arrangements. I don't believe anybody did it first. I mean, before you.
I think that was the first, yes.
Yeah, that was changed right in the studio. Because we originally started to do it was slow. The original, the way it was originally done.
Right.
And Chuck Sago said, no, let's try this. And we worked on it for a little while and changed it. We came back the next day, we had it like we wanted, and we changed the tempo on it. Started off slow, then pick up the tempo.
I'm through with my old love. I loved it through and through. I'm searching for a new love. Can that new love be you? I want Sunday kind of love. What by you? Every day, what by you? I will be love and to hold. What by you? Well, it's cool. Sunday kind of love. That's on the square. What by you? Please go where. What by you? I will be love. That's Saturday night. What by you? I will be Sunday kind of love. Sunday kind of love. Hallelujah, my sorrow. All my sorrow.
That the group
Yes.
was. And Whispering Bells, when it was originally sung, it was a slow tune. And quick heat.
How slow?
Slow.
A ballad?
Yeah, ballad. Well, I'd never heard it, but it was told to me by Quick himself. We talked about it a few years
Maybe
later.
that was Quick's idea when he first wrote it, that he was going to have it use it as a ballad. But when we went in to record, in fact, when we started rehearsing, the tempo was there.
Yeah, yeah.
The original tempo.
But I always thought it was at that tempo originally, but it was all no. We used to sing this thing. It was a ballad. It was a real slow tune, you know, the grinder they used to call them.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And he had that kind of magic about him.
You know, wouldn't that be interesting if you were to do that today, opening it like Sunday Kind of Love, and then all of a sudden kicking into the beat that's on the ballad?
Yeah, who knows? May work.
When you recorded You Cheated, which you did hit the charts with it.
Yeah, we covered the Shields on that. The Shields had a hit on it.
Okay, now that's what I'm going to ask you.
Yeah.
The Shields covered the Slades,
Right, okay.
a white group from Texas.
Okay.
But the Shields killed the Slades version. Usually the covers aren't always better, but the Shields version just murders the cover. And you covered the Shields, who
Right.
covered the Slades.
Right.
And yet, every version of You Cheated entered the national charts the same week.
Is
So
that
even
right?
though they covered the Slades, and you covered,
The Shields.
because the Shields, as a matter of fact, now that I think of it, the Shields were also on Dot, but they hadn't recorded it for Dot. They had been on Tender Records.
Okay.
Just as you had come on Dot, but you'd actually been on Phoebe. Did you have any qualms about covering the record?
No, I had no qualms at all. In fact, I like the tune.
It's a wonderful
Yeah, it's a
song.
great tune, yeah.
The name Dell Vikings comes from sports.
I don't know. The name Viking was a basketball team in Brooklyn, a social club that Quick, throwing in William Blakely, Frank Ayers, and quite a few of their friends were a part of.
But where does Dell come from?
Dell is the
Yeah, but Dell as
the
D,
Vikings.
Dell as D is in a different language.
Yeah.
Vikings.
Yeah. Well, that was Quick's idea. Yeah, it was Quick's
So
idea.
if you say the Dell Vikings, you're really saying the Dell, the Vikings.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
See, I had heard that there was, I don't know what I'm talking about here, but some group of Vikings that had been called Dell Vikings in some old novel.
Oh, yeah?
Clarence might have gotten it from that, but that was only a rumor.
Maybe a possibility. I don't know. I do know that he went to a Viking High, or he played basketball.
The basketball team is called the Vikings.
Does Gus Backus leave when you part with Mercury before ABC Paramount, or at what point does he disappear?
Gus went overseas in, what, 57?
57.
Yeah, he went overseas. He got not discharged, but got placed overseas in Germany.
He got discharged, not discharged, shipped out, because he stayed in there while he was over there. Just after,
After you did the session in California?
Yeah, because we went to California, did the movie.
Yeah, the Big Beat.
And when we came back there, then he was gone. Then he got shipped out then, yeah.
That was with Chuck Segal too. He went to Columbia.
This was prior to ABC Paramount.
Right.
How many things were done?
Parents called Kripp. And we went to New York to sign contracts. And Clarence decided he was going to back out. Clarence had those kind of moves. He'd be through, I think when he called Kripp, he was through with Norman.
Yeah.
Some personal things, you know what I mean? So he called Kripp. And we went up and signed contracts with Columbia. And then he got upset about something in the middle of that deal, and he backed out, but we still went and recorded because Chuck wanted to record a session.
The group was a versatile group. You never knew who was going to come out singing lead in the group. You know, and with that, we didn't lose anything. And I like to say that today, we still got that little mystique about it.
Okay, on The Real History of Rock and Roll, that's the end of part 2 of our interview with the Dell Vikings. Next, on The Real History of Rock and Roll, part 3 of our interview with the Dell Vikings, of course. This has been The Real History of Rock and Roll. I want to thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Goodbye. And now let's go to part 3 on The Real History of Rock and Roll, part 3 of our interview with the Dell Vikings.
It was the group was a versatile group. You never knew who was going to come out singing lead in the group. You know, and with that, we didn't lose anything. And I like to say that today, we still got that little mystique about it, and we don't. If someone else is leading it, we don't lose anything.
When we went in for a session, we picked the songs, and who was best qualified to do that particular song, that would be his song. He would do the lead.
Yeah, do it.
You know.
And then you could. The camaraderie thing was there. And you got all right. Then we work on the background where you get those words together,
Right.
and that cut out a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of confusion. The songs was there. Hey, which one you want? I take this one. Take this one.
Right.
You know, and you put your heart in it.
But there are a lot of groups, even though the other guys can sing, and in some cases are very good singers, and they may show up on the flip sides. There's a lot of groups where the lead would not let go of that.
That's true. Yeah. Well, we didn't have that problem. There's no problem about who's going to sing lead.
Ego or whatever.
No. We were just trying to get a good product out there.
Right. Well, before we get to ABC, Norman, you sound not unlike Herbie Cox, the lead singer of the Cleftones. I mean, I could imagine Herbie singing Come Go With Me and sounding good. And I can imagine you singing Little Girl of Mine or Can We Be Sweethearts and sounding Cleftones-ish. Okay? On Mercury, you sang lead on Heart and Soul. And it was maybe a year and a half later that the Cleftones had their biggest hit, Heart and Soul, with Herbie, as I say. And I say, that complimentary, you guys kind of complement each other in the sound. You're both striking lead singers. Did you feel that, did you have any feeling about that when you heard that record, knowing you had done an up-tempo Heart and Soul and the slight similarity maybe in the voices?
I didn't. In fact, we did it again in 70, it was 68 or 69, Heart and Soul again, and we changed it around. But that, I just liked the song, and hear someone else doing it, didn't. I said, well, how he do it? Oh, well, that's okay. But I never given any thought that we had familiar voices. If I was across the street and heard the record, I could understand it then. But to be in that environment, it didn't do anything. I know it wasn't too many of us out here sounding alike.
Well, when their Heart and Soul became such a big hit, you didn't think, did that on Mercury and it was sitting there? No.
We did That's Why, and Jackie Wilson come out with it. Now, I felt that we got slighted on that one for the city. We knew he was coming out, but they waited and let him get theirs out first. And I felt slighted about that. I thought that we should have had ours out first since we recorded it before he did. That's Why I Love You So.
They delivered.
They held it up. That's about the only tune I can say, in the years of recording, that I felt that we could have jumped the gun on someone and really got off to a good start. As far as that, they would have to cover us, that we covered, and then they didn't even play it that much, but they did cut it loose. Mm-hmm. That's about the only tune. That's why.
The only one you feel that way about.
Yeah, and it's a business thing as far as I was concerned, to look at it and say, well, let us be first with something for a change, And this was during the time where these groups are beginning to lose their little shine. The company was holding back on stuff. I guess they didn't feel they would get burnt with it. But when when Jackie Wilson come out with it, we got to get it out, Well, yeah, a little late.
Yeah. What did you think of Cool Shake?
I thought Gus did a good job on it. And when he left, went overseas, then I just took up the lead on it.
Did you think that that maybe this is going to sound critical, I don't really mean it to be, but I always felt that Cool Shake was a little more something that an R&B person or a musician would get into, and less that the Whispering Bells, Come Go With Me kid would understand. I can't explain that.
Well, for one thing, they didn't consider our brand of music rhythm and blues. We were in the crossover with the Everly Brothers, rockabilly.
Yeah.
See that's and Cool Shake was on that vein, the rockabilly.
It's also what made Maggie run.
What made Maggie run? Joey Bristol. Yeah.
But when I first heard, I wasn't on that session, but when I first heard the song, I heard it on the radio for the first time. I was in Coraopolis, Pennsylvania, living there then. Hey, I said to myself, I was like, wow, I should have been on that one. That's a hit. I said, these guys got a hit here. Move. When I first heard it, yeah. It's a great tune.
I guess I'm describing to you, see, I'm the person you're on one side of the microphone. Mm-hmm. I'm the person who was on the other side of the radio. Okay. I think I represented millions of people who were sitting out there listening. And whoa. Yeah. And I guess I would I wanted another Whistling Bells, another
Okay.
Camaraderie. I mean, even though you guys actually were better than that because you were constantly doing different things, which is to your credit, I think there's a certain amount of the public that are just hungry, you know what I mean, for a certain, that's what I was waiting for. And
And most of the time, the recording companies would try to milk a song.
Yeah.
Like Come Go With Me, just like they Come Along With Me.
Yeah.
They try to get as close to Come Go With Me as possible.
Well, sure,
See, that was Mercury's effort.
yes.
Because it would Come Go With Me was still hot enough that they said, well, maybe we can get a little bit of this. And they come up with Come Along With Me. See, I think he wrote that overnight.
Well, if they got the airplay, I think it would have been more
Yeah,
popular.
yeah. Because that really, it takes more than one listen, I think, but once it gets to you, you
Yes.
don't forget it.
Yes.
It really sticks
Yes.
with you.
Down, 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 down,
But I know some airplay was maybe a little looser out of the New York area. Was there anything played from any of your albums that kicked up action, but that then wasn't put out on a single, but maybe should have?
Sunday Kind of Love was one of them. Now they took that off the album, just played that to death, and that was another one that a lot of people who were in the business would like to have Mercury put that out on a single.
Yeah.
I'm through with my old love. I loved her through and through. I'm searching for a new love. Can that new love be you? I want Sunday kind of love.
When you got to ABC Paramount, the group that got to ABC Paramount, you were in New York, Clarence was in New York, you didn't have a group. You weren't doing it. And you were in ABC Paramount.
Yes, Chuck Sagal was responsible for that one, though.
And was the first recording they did, Bring Back Your Heart?
Yeah, that was one of the first things that we did on that session, yes. And we went down to Dick Clark. Dick Clark was still in Philadelphia then. And we got a shot down on his show, and we did it on his show on maybe about a few weeks after it was recorded.
That was a pretty successful record.
Yeah, it was great. Well,
Mid-61.
yes. In fact, another thing came out of that, we were staying in New York at 116th and St. Nick's at the, what hotel was that? Cecil Hotel. And there was a group that was staying at the hotel at that time that weren't recording, but they had hits out prior to that. And that group came out and went down to ABC after they discovered that they were looking for more talent. and they came out with Gypsy Woman. So you know who that was. Right. Yeah. We were sitting at the same hotel, and we got a contract, and we went down, and we came back and told St. Curtis, they're looking for another act down there. And they went down and did the Gypsy Woman. So you're darn right.
There's history there.
Yeah.
What else did you do? Now, I'm sorry. The ABC Paramount group, did it remain the group that you told me about for all the recordings?
For a while. We stayed together, maybe a couple of years.
So all the ABC was that group?
Yes.
A lot of good stuff with Paramount. They kept it in the can.
When you do, and I was surprised to hear you do it last night. I was surprised by a lot of things last night. I hear Wedding Bells. Well, that sounds like it doesn't sound like the 60s record that it was. It sounds like a 50s hit.
Okay.
And boy, did that come over strong.
They thought that it was going to be a hit. They was looking for it to be a hit, but I don't know whether it's because of distribution or what. Something went down. It wasn't pushed.
Like when they did Come Go With Me, it was their style. They did Whispering Bells, it was their style. They went along with that. I think what took over was producers, companies.
Oh, yeah.
They dictate to you what they want you to sing. Here's a producer who's got a sister who wrote a song. You promised her he's going to get it in. You're going to sing this song. Well, you do it, you do your best job on it. But sometimes it don't always work like that. It's not that the groups themselves change their style. Mostly somebody else wanted.
We had one little, I guess you would call it a professional temper tantrum. We had discussed. We was in Chicago. We were doing a session for Mercury, and Sago was overseeing. He wasn't doing the actual A&R. Another fellow was doing it, and he was fumbling in the dark as far as I'm concerned. See, I was a little disappointed to the fact Chuck wasn't doing the session and someone else. Now we got to go this guy's route. And he had some weird ideas. And he stopped the session and he come up and said, you know what I hear? I hear a mandolin. And he wasn't got one. You know, and this guy's up, he's playing his mandolin. We did about 2 takes, and I couldn't take no more. I blew my top. You know, I apologized to the musicians the next day and the people involved in it. I think, man, it would become a circus. And Mercury was getting to a point where if they want to throw somebody in, well, we know we can make money on the dog Vikings. You washboard you here. You get your sounding with this. Yeah. And just come up with some Lulus, man. You know, some real humdingers. And I felt at that time somebody got to say something, man, because this is, if you let this in, you know what you're going to get next? You get a polka band, man. You know, that's...
Not that you have anything against a mandolin or polka
but it didn't belong there.
It just didn't fit. It doesn't fit
It didn't fit. No, it didn't fit.
You weren't singing the
Yeah, that's right about that. It didn't fit. It was not there. It didn't.
See, today with 24 or 32 tracks and everything, they might not even tell you. They might bring the mandolin.
Yeah, sure.
2 days later, they're not there.
Yeah, but back in those days, you looked him in the face when they did the job.
Yeah.
You knew who was going to be there. Well, they was dealing with stereo 2-track.
Yeah. happened following ABC Paramount?
Well, we went on the road, and just did some gigs. Played a lot of colleges down through the South. Then around 60, 64, 65, things, the work wasn't there, you know. So some of us had to find jobs, you know, had to find another profession. So we went to work. Then we came back together. When we got back together full time, really to start the whole thing over again, was around in 1980, 1979 and 1980, when we went to California to really put it back together. That's when John and I and Ritzy decided to tighten the thing up again. And once we got it tight, we came back to the East Coast, and we talked with Norman, and Dave Ritzy was in California. The three of us got together, went to New York, and talked with some agencies in New York, and we've been doing it ever since together, except for Dave. He's not with us anymore as far as singing, performing, but we're going to be doing another recording session pretty soon, so he may be on the session.
The first time in 30 years that they laid eyes on the group. They heard us a lot on the radio, but never seen us. And certain songs that they don't get a chance to hear, it is, to them, it's a blessing in disguise. They are taken by it because the first time I get a chance to hear it, and the first time I heard this, now when they go hear another album, then their memories be, oh, I heard them do that. Oh, you did? Where were they? You know, it's a plus.
You don't feel, it doesn't bother you that you might be singing true love and that they may not be totally appreciating the specialness of what they're hearing.
Well, as long as...
See, I guess my questions are always end up being negative, but I mean...
Well, I think what you're saying is...
I was knocked out hearing those songs.
Right.
I said, man, these people ought to stand up and say, thank God the Del Vikings are here in 1989, able and willing to do these kind of songs. But you can't tell the people that because they don't know.
Well, we were in Santa Cruz about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and this is the first time that we use all of the we did a show of all Del Vikings tunes.
Wow.
It's good to us because if we could, we'll know when we got you. Look out there in the audience, see them smiles on those faces. Oh, you got a captive audience, and you know that they appreciate what they hear and what they see.
So I was saying with Norman, there's so many people in their head that are singing dum dum dum. Even people that don't think they know "Come Go With Me," kids
It's true.
who would say, "No, I don't know who that." But
Right.
you know,
It's
I
just
mean,
there, it's registered there.
you're into the American pop culture subconscious. I mean, you're in there, even if you don't want to be. You don't want to be, but you're in there. You guys are part of the dawning years of the great. I think easily the greatest pop culture phenomenon in history, rock and roll.
And we're very grateful to be a part of it.
And would you introduce, we've talked to you and we haven't talked to you, and would you introduce the other fellows?
Yeah, John Byas. John's been with the group since 1965.
Since 1965.
Yeah.
Were you with any groups previous to that?
Not professional. This street groups and choir and stuff like that.
I think I've asked everything that I wanted to know in terms of trying to understand, you know, how these various Del Vikings groups fit into the puzzle and how most of this stuff happened more than I'm just Del Vikings.
Right. There's a lot of acts out here that's impersonating either the Del Vikings, the Drifters, the Coasters, or whatever, you understand? Yeah. And yes, there are some impersonators out here calling themselves the Del Vikings. Why people do this, you know, I don't know. But,
That's the downside of the business. We got some, I call them chameleons. Be anything you want to be. You want to be the Drifters tonight,
But
5 Keys tomorrow night, and the Dubs the next day.
the chameleon word is a little nicer than thief.
Oh, we must be diplomatic about this.
Yeah. Yeah, but hey, I I mean, the name the Del Vikings would mean nothing if you guys hadn't been so good in the first place. So for somebody else to use it,
Well, once the population, the buying public, see the original group, which we are, Kripp Johnson, Ritzy, John Byas, and myself, we consider ourselves the original Del Vikings. We've done the leg work, we did the back-breaking work for the 30-some odd years, and these cats only been out less than 10 years. So they get comfort in that type of thing, you know.
so you're not, while you don't like it.
We're doing something about it.
You're doing.
Yes,
you're doing.
yes,
Oh,
As far as the patent is concerned, the name is concerned,
Yeah.
right, the rights,
yeah.
be taken care of. These people, these imposters will cease what they're doing.
About it. If knowing that you do know the original, I would demand my money back. You know, if
Yeah.
you're not getting what you pay for. Like, who wants to buy a Chevy and they're selling you Fords? They
That's
don't
right.
get it. Yeah. Yeah. And it's an etzel at that. But that's in the public's hand. They can stop that. But they wouldn't go see a bogus Barry Manilow, and they would demand the money back. Under no circumstances would they pull that.
That is the main point.
This is
If you can't take a single artist, which you can, of course, the best you can do is say, I'm doing a tribute to Elvis, or I'm doing a tribute to Bobby Darin. You can't say that you're these people, simply because, like you say, the public. Even if you got away with it legally, the public would hang you. Your name, the Del Vikings, should be as personal to you as Norman Wright should be.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's outrageous because it's the name of a group that a bunch of characters come together and say, that's what we are. It's just unbelievable. Well, did I miss anything in the story?
Now,
We'll see you next time on The Real History of Rock and Roll. The emphasis on real, R-E-A-L, those 4 letters. And it's very important because most people give you things that they say are real, but they don't know what they're talking about. And they don't even care. They're arrogant and they're ignorant. And they have no regard for the music. So they don't care how they present it. And they figure the people watching are so stupid they won't know the difference anyway. Well, at any rate, we present the real history of rock and roll for real. And that's about it. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.